Jennifer, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Seems so quiet.
Oh,
Charlottesville has a quorum. We need one more for Albemarle.
yep. So is Khaki still coming?
Yes.
Okay.
Anita, you're facilitating or chairing, whatever we call it. Because there's no Misty.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that.
Well, Lindsay's substituting, and it probably would be really mean to make her facilitate since she's never been on.
Okay. Oh, that's not very good. Let me, do you have the agenda? I'll pull it up I do better when I'm looking at an agenda. Let me try again. Okay.
And there's Khaki, so we have quorum.
Okay. Are we ready then?
Yes.
Okay. Can y'all see what I shared?
Yes.
Okay. So this meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County website. https://www.albemarle.org/community/county-calendar. Participation will include the opportunity to comment on those matters for which comments from the public will be received. We are going to take attendance, and so I will just call people to introduce themselves. Hold on, I'm having trouble with my screen. Lindsay.
Good afternoon. I'm Lindsay Munson. I'm with Community Attention. I'm here for Misty.
Kevin.
Kevin Kirst with Albemarle County Public Schools.
Khaki.
I am Khaki Dimick, and I'm subbing with Albemarle County DSS, and I'm subbing in for Mary.
Thank you. Sue.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Moffett, the director at Charlottesville DSS.
And Sue Houchins.
Hi, I work for Charlottesville Social Services, and I'm covering for Katie, but I'm certainly not a Katie, so don't expect as much.
Katina.
Good afternoon. I am Katina Odie, the Chief Academic Officer in Charlottesville City Schools.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Martha. Oh, you're on mute.
Martha Carroll from the Court Service Unit.
Erin.
Erin Callis, I represent the Charlottesville Albemarle Health Department.
Krista.
Krista Gallio, I'm with the Court Service Unit, and I'm here representing Program Subcommittee.
Taylor.
Hi, I'm Taylor, and I'm a DSS specialist for Albemarle working for the CSA.
And I thought I saw Ryan, but now I can't see him on my window.
I'm here. Ryan Davidson, Office of Management and Budget at Albemarle County.
Did I miss anybody? All right. What about Jennifer? Jennifer?
Sorry.
No?
Yep. Jennifer Wells, CSA Coordinator for Albemarle.
Okay, so our first part of business is to approve or discuss the consent agenda. Is there any reason why we cannot have approval? Is there anything anyone wants to talk about the consent agenda at this point? Good, that makes a real consent agenda. Do I have a motion from Charlottesville to approve the consent agenda?
This is Sue Moffett. I move Charlottesville approves the consent agenda for the city.
Do we have a second?
This is Erin Callis. I second that from Charlottesville.
All right, anyone opposed? Okay, the agenda passes. Do I have a motion from Albemarle to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Khaki, a second.
Martha Carroll, second.
All right, anyone opposed? All right, the agenda passes. So our first item is the local policy revision.
Yep. So for this one, this is the one where the local policy, it's the clarification about the private provider rep for FAPT. And that this, we have a rule in there about you can't be appointed, you have to have like a break in between. And so what CPMT decided last time was that it applied to the agency and not just to the individual. So there was a question about whether if it was a different person from the same agency could serve a back-to-back term on FAPT. And so you guys had decided you did not want to do that, that you wanted to give other agencies the opportunity. And so this is the local policy revision to clarify that so that everybody's on the same page about it.
Is there a motion do we need to approve this, Jennifer, now? Okay, so we need a motion from Charlottesville to approve the revision.
This is Sue Moffett, so moved.
Second?
This is Erin. I'll second. Sue and I have a pattern now.
Anyone opposed? So passed. Is there an approval of the revision from Albemarle?
This is Ryan, so moved.
Second?
Martha Carroll, second.
Is there anyone opposed? The revision passes. Thanks, Jennifer. All right, that was easy. So we're on to FAPT update.
Yep. So Sue Houchins, I didn't know if you had an update for the city, for the county. I think the main thing that we're seeing now is just a lot more requests for material supports. So folks needing help around housing and utilities and just those kinds of expenses. So I definitely think we've seen an increase in those. And then we're also continuing to see struggles with residential facilities being able to maintain our kids. So I know Region 10 has just recently had 2 cases where their kids are being discharged not successfully. And so they're likely coming back to the community and they're going to need resources put in place to help serve them, but also recognizing that the residential facilities were really saying that they probably needed a higher level of care. So we just continue to struggle with what to do, really, is kind of where we're at.
So I would add that that's consistent with Charlottesville from what I'm hearing from Katie. The housing struggles continue.
I think that's it for the FAPT update.
Review of the routine foster care expenses. Jennifer, you wanted,
So if anybody has
that
any
doesn't have,
questions,
is there any questions? That doesn't have to be approved, correct? Because that just is. Any questions? Okay, any CSA coordinator update?
yes. So the one thing we have, it went out with the attachments from Valita. There's a survey monkey that's being done for the state around parent representatives. And so Katie and I looked at it, and then we agreed when we did our agenda planning call with Misty that we could answer most of the questions, but there were two that we wanted to bring to you guys to see if there's anything that you all wanted to contribute in looking at this. And so the two questions are, the first is, what are your top 3 challenges to recruiting and retaining parent representatives? And then the other one is, do you have anything you would like to recommend as a best practice for including and elevating parent voice within CPMT and FAPT, particularly parents with lived experience? So we just wanted to bring that to you all to see if you had any comments that you would want to make as we're filling this out.
What was the second question?
Do you have anything you'd like to recommend as a best practice for including and elevating parent voice within CPMT and FAPT, particularly parents with lived experience? I mean, so certainly I think the city has seen like the struggle of just trying to get that role filled on CPMT. It's definitely been easier, I think, to have that parent rep on FAPT. But we also offer a stipend for that role on FAPT. We don't do that for CPMT. So I just don't know if you guys have any thoughts about anything that you would want included.
So I'm sorry, Jennifer, this is Kevin Kurst. The one that I had thought about, maybe played with in the past, but we could certainly formalize it, would be, we have a special ed advisory committee in the county that's pretty strong. Like, I know there are some divisions I've heard over the years, right, that really struggle to have parent representatives, but I pull in, now I do fairness, I do evening meetings once a month, but I have representation of usually at least 15 strong parents throughout the year that I could at least formally, if you and I agree, do a little write-up and I present to the group, just in terms of their announcements. They have a very structured agenda, just as we do in public meeting. That might be one. And as private day school is very much on top of the agenda of CSA, both at the state level, right, and locally, it might make sense. We have some parents that have experience both with private day schools and providers using our prevention and et cetera. So that might just be one to add, and that I would certainly formally work with CPMT, CSA coordinator to add.
Jennifer, this is Sue Moffett. I like those ideas, Kevin, a lot, but I do think it's important that we find a way to pay people for their time.
So I was also going to include in here just the timing of the meeting, because I know our parent rep, Michelle, has mentioned that before as being problematic for her. So I was going to include that as one of the challenges is just the timing of the meeting. And then certainly we can include no pay. And I didn't know if folks had any other thoughts about things that you think make it challenging to fill that, or any ideas you have about what might be a way to include or get these folks to fill these positions. So if that's everything, we're good. Or if not, if anybody has anything else, feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, the pay, I'm like Sue, I've felt for a long time we should pay parents to be on CPMT, and maybe OCS could figure out a way for that, because we haven't been able to figure out a way. I think it's an issue. To me, it's related to some of our diversity and equity goals that, you know, if we want the voice of someone with lived experience, then they may not have a job that is as flexible as mine to be here, that they would need to be paid. So I just want to underscore that.
One other thing to say about pay as well, it's not just, I know it would be a sum, but if you think about the time for the meetings plus the time to look at documents that are sent, like it's a lot to factor in the background, not just necessarily being here and present for the meeting. So there's a lot of things to consider.
So maybe we need to think about the timing of the meeting at some point too. I mean, I know there's some unrelated discussion about that and maybe different dates, but maybe that's something we need to consider. Although I'm certainly not opposed if there were a way to compensate people. And I think Aaron's point is well taken about compensating them for the full range of responsibilities.
Sounds good. Thank you all. The only other thing that I was going to bring up for today's meeting under the CSA coordinator update is just bringing it to CPMT's attention. It's really up to you guys what you want to do with this. But so I talked to Katie, and so she's seen some of this. I've seen some of this. Where we expected for FY23, as we've sent out the provider agreements, that folks were likely going to go up on their rates. That's pretty much to be expected across the board. But we do have a couple of outliers where they've gone up pretty significantly. And so because CPMT is the one that enters into the contracts with these providers, part of that contract includes the rate sheet. And so it's really just bringing it to your attention that when we see these things, is there something more or additional that you all would want? We do require a rate justification letter as part of what they submit with the contract when their rates increase. And so folks have definitely, I mean, we get those, and it's primarily been due to just like the increased cost of everything. But like I said, we have a couple that have gone up. You know, we had one that went up on one service 50% from last year. And so it's just a question of, is there sort of a threshold or a point where maybe you all want additional information if they exceed beyond a certain amount, or is it that as long as the letter's there, you all feel comfortable with whatever the rate that they submit?
You're looking for, like, if we want, like, if they increase by 20%, is there a process to review?
Right. Do you want something extra to sort of understand the rate increase? Because at this point, we don't have, there's nothing in policy about how much they can go up. There isn't, we don't follow any sort of anything. So people can raise their rates to anything they want. And like I said, in the past, I mean, as long as they sent a justification letter, we really kind of accepted that and went with that. But like I said, when we start seeing these rates that seem pretty extreme, there's just a question of what do you all want to do when those kinds of things get submitted.
Yeah, I would think we would want to set a percentage to review, whether that's 30 or 40 or something that feels a lot. I don't know what other people's thoughts are.
This is way outside my expertise in this, but I agree with Nita. I think if there's a justification letter, that gives us something to consider, but also I think if there's a increase that seems unusual, like 30 or 40% over a year sounds like a lot to me, that we would want to look at it further than whatever information is provided in the justification letter. Is that possible for us to set up a 2-tier system?
Sure. I mean, I think the question really becomes like, what is it you all want to do? And then we just have to figure out So like over here, I have somebody that helps do the provider agreements. I believe Katie's got somebody at the city that helps her do those as well.
He does.
So it would be kind of relying on those folks to be looking at what's coming in and comparing it to what it was in the previous fiscal year. And then just making us aware so that we could bring it to CPMT for discussion. But it's kind of an issue, you know, that they're coming in now. So I think part of it is if you guys decide you want to see which providers those are, that we need to be bringing them to you probably, I mean, next month, because we can't, no purchase orders get created until these provider agreements are approved.
Our
Yeah, and I
pers-
will, oh, sorry, Sue, go ahead.
That's okay. I'm just going to comment that our person who enters rates and gets the contracts back, he's already making Katie aware of some of those providers who've increased significantly. And Katie's making contact with them to have more, you know, discussions about it. Some of them have, I'd say, kind of negotiated with us, but most of them have just continued to justify, you know, the rates. So we do have a mechanism for identifying those and then at least having a discussion with the providers.
And what I was going to say is, I know we get the monthly CSA updates on the monthly financial updates, but this has especially if we're seeing 20, 30, you said 50% increases in some of these areas, like that's going to have real implications as we're putting together the budgets and maybe as part of the financial report. And I understand that a lot of this depends on the amount of usage you have for each of these providers as to what kind of increases you're going to see. Like a 50% increase for someone that you're spending 10 hours with is going to be very different for 50% increase for someone that's going to give you 100 hours of service. So, you know, there's got to be that economy of scale there, but just a general idea of, hey, overall, like maybe something we could work into the monthly financials of overall, we're seeing this kind of an increase could likely translate into this range when we get to actually looking at the CSA budgets, just so we have a general idea, especially if we're going to need to, one, as we're putting together the budget, look at in the next coming fiscal year, increasing those contributions to CSA, and two, as we get further through the fiscal year of like, this is really gonna, like, we've got this budget approved and this is really gonna hurt our bottom line, and we're gonna need to figure out ways to make sure we're covered as we get to the end of the fiscal year. I'd love to have that somehow worked into the financial report. I don't know quite the exact mechanism to do that, but it's something that would be good to know.
Did you need more from us, Jennifer? From
So
a
I guess really,
process perspective, it feels like we agree we should review it if it gets high, or, you know, just like what's the impact, but do you need more?
so I guess the question is like, we do have, I think Katie's got a couple and I have a couple of providers that went up pretty significantly. And so the ones that I have anyway, like we haven't sent their provider agreement through for approval yet because we were waiting to see how you all wanted to proceed with it before we do that. So I just, as far as figuring out next steps, I don't know like what you all want. Is it a percentage where it's like, we want you to be aware that this is like, you know, and our struggle has been that we've always had a hard time with sort of figuring out whether there should be any sort of like rate increase cap. And I know it's gone back and forth. It's come up, I think, a couple of times over the years. And so it's just like, we're sort of here again at this place of, at what point do you feel like you've reached a threshold that I don't know. I mean, I guess that's really the question. And is it a percentage? Is it like if a rate comes in that's, you know, I don't know, whatever the percentage you all decide on, then when we see that, then we would bring it back to CPMT for you guys to sort of give that final approval before the agreement is signed off on. Like, does that make sense?
My question is, it makes, well, it doesn't totally make sense. Only because if, like, it doesn't answer the question that then what? So I get the review. So let's just use the example of some significant changes in base pay for frontline workers, for classified staff. And you have an organization that has a lot of classified staff and we went up and above the living wage. And we used the data from this area. And that is why we, plus inflation, and we have a lot of travel involved in our work. Right there, I could write a letter for many of these places. And so the question then is, and then what? So, like, would CPMT actually say, and this is more just for the group to go, put in we recommend looking at other providers, because as Ryan mentioned, there's always context. So for example, a provider, let's say something off the top of my head, mentoring, therapeutic mentoring. Someone goes from $70 an hour to $120. It's like, whoa, would CPMT be in a position? And that it's just a question for the group to say, okay, we hear you. You know, I don't know the authority that we'd have to say going to approve a provider agreement. We would recommend each of our participating agencies not make this vendor a first choice. Like, I'm just wondering what we could actually say or do without getting into legal hot water.
I mean, there's what you just described, which is we ask our people not to utilize the higher end of process. But what about if we said, nope, we're only paying, and we look at like our highest or what we're comfortable, like, no, sorry for mentoring. You know, we're only paying as high as $80 an hour this year. You know, I feel like that's cleaner. So I just put that out there as then we would have to put caps on things like Jennifer was describing, but I wonder if we could do it specific to like our highest vendor in that service arena.
But Nita, wouldn't economy of scale, so if we're talking equity and having providers, maybe smaller end providers that would provide services that are multicultural and diverse, versus, not that the big guys don't, but a larger organization that has economy of scale to absorb some of those costs, we may be, and I guess that's right, looking at the well water there, is like how.
We would have to have that discussion, you're
Yeah,
right, just
that's
like
right.
what Ryan was talking about.
Yep.
But to me, like, it would be worse to not use them and bring them on like it's all fine.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? But
Yep.
we'd have to consider like what they face, the economy of scale, you know, the big guys can often do more, all that kinds of stuff.
So would we
But
do
yeah.
like what we used to do, like have a agency presentation to CPMT? Like they get 30 minutes to make a pitch?
I'm okay with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I was picturing you bring the justification letter and then we ask the probing questions that then Jennifer and Katie go back to probe. You know, we need to know more about this, or, you know, so that rather than we move to presentation, we read the justification letter and try to find out, well, what do we want to know more? I mean, does that feel like a simple enough process? I don't know. I feel like I'm out of my league here, so give room for other people to talk. I don't have anything. I will tell you all, so Medicaid increased all their rates by 12.5%. Is it just just to understand, so legally, if you take Medicaid, you can't charge someone less than what Medicaid's paying you. So just to let folks know that if it's a vendor that is taking Medicaid, they're going to have to go up to the Medicaid rate.
So what I might provide, just in terms, I'll just say what the schools do, right? That we do for operations. It's if you go above a certain percent, which we could throw around, right? That would at least flag not like 15%. That to me is like inflation, living wage. We could probably go, yeah, they're going to send a form letter, we'll be fine. Above 20%, that's a red flag. We'd like a justification explanation that CPMT would review. I'm just throwing it out for consideration, just to move toward a piece of action, of which then we would request some documentation on that line item that went above, let's say at 20 or above a 20% increase, as to why, for recommendations from CPMT. Does that?
Kevin, no matter the size of the organization,
What's that?
no matter the size of the organization.
I get that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, one of the cost control questions that came up, I don't know, 5 years ago, was really not only because these costs were escalating, but also because there were questions around quality control, like what we were actually paying for, particularly in this category of mentoring that felt like it spanned a great distance. And so it does seem to me like we get at both concerns, you can't just automatically always go up every year because we're watching that. And B, there's an opportunity with this 20% threshold for a face-to-face presentation with CPMT where there's an opportunity to ask questions or to get to some of the quality control concerns at the same time. I mean, I think it's potentially a big burden for CPMT, particularly around the time of year around contracts, which is already a big burden for Jennifer and Katie. And so I would want to make sure that whatever, even though I'm not on this team anymore all the time, but to protect Katie and Jennifer from having to carry that water, to make sure that it really does live with CPMT. But I think that gets to some question that we've had about cost and quality that we haven't been able to get our teeth into for many years. So I dig it from afar.
Just as far, and Jennifer, you may, like, I agree. I like the process that we're describing. That sounds good. But I'm wondering if the first swath is, it went over and here's their justification letter they already sent in. Because then we don't have to waste our time and their time, because some of them we may be like, oh yeah, that's like, we get, we know that size of the organization, we know what happened. I wouldn't want us to require a presentation for everyone over like 30% or 20%. That way we could weed through it and protect Jennifer and Katie's time a little bit more. Or not, I don't know.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts if we land at a percentage, then you guys just let me know what that is. But what if we just start with what Nita's describing where, and like I said, right now, it's only been just, at least for me, I'm not sure about Katie, it's only been a couple of providers that we've seen this with. So right now.
I think that's true. That's true for us.
Okay. So I'm thinking it would just be a couple of them that you guys would need to look at their justification letter. And then you can decide at that point if it's worth doing anything extra or if it seems like that works. But at this point, I think what's going to be the most helpful is having what the percentage amount is that you guys feel like would be the place to where you think you need to see something.
Sue threw out 30. I liked that one. Kevin was more grinchy and said 20.
Oh, it was just to get us started. The question I have is, are we talking line item or typically like bundled services, right? Like for example, a child in residential nursing service goes up 30%. Are we gonna like ask for justification for nursing? Or are we looking at the typical bundle? I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah, I mean, so again, this is sort of up to you guys, but my thought is like, for the person at the city who's looking at these and for the person that we have at the county looking, like if they see something that catches their attention and then it comes to Katie and I, whether it be like a total amount or just a service, at the point that it kind of draws our attention, I think that's the piece where we would be saying, okay, we need to see something like what else did they provide with their rate sheet? And then we can just bring that to you all to look at. Does that sound okay?
I think so. And I'm very comfortable with 30.
Okay, and we'll go with 30. All right, I think that's it for the CSA coordinator update.
All right. OCS communications.
Yes, they were
Was there
a
OCS
lot.
communications? A whole bunchy.
So starting at the top, so Administrative Memo 2205. This one just had to do with all of the changes that went into the state budget for FY23. So again, you guys can look through. Some of it's already been mentioned. Medicaid rates went up 12.5 for community-based. And then the psychiatric residential treatment facilities, they all got increases, but it was each facility, their rates. So it used to be kind of a standard rate for Medicaid for all of these residential facilities, but it's no longer that way. So each of them get assigned a rate specific to their facility, which again, I sort of worry about for those folks who didn't get the maximum, how willing they're going to be to take some of the more difficult cases. So I'm just worried we're going to continue to see this pushback about not wanting some of the harder to place kids, but we'll see. And then foster care maintenance rates went up. So again, like these are all things that are going to impact our local budget. So either through the match or through CSA met the local match or through the Medicaid match that we have to pay. And so a lot of this is really just things to be aware of that will likely impact our local budget. The next one is 2206. And this one has to do, trying to just look through here. This is about the whole shift that's happening around private day providers. And so OCS is in the middle of what's going to be a physical impact study that has to go to the state. And as a result, they're having to change how we report private days. And so part of what they're putting in place is so that they can do this physical impact study. So for the school folks, as of April 15th, the private days are supposed to be reporting their tier, like which tier they fall into. And then I know it impacts the purchase orders that get created because you're not going to be able to use the old names anymore. The names have been updated and I think they're updated in the system now. So you just want to make sure you're paying attention to that. And again, the plan is that this money is moving out of CSA over to DOE as of, I think it's supposed to be FY24. But again, it's been delayed previously. We'll see where it ends up before it's all said and done. So that's what that memo was about. 2207. This one has to do with the parent representatives. And it was just a way to expand who's eligible to serve as a parent rep. So previously, you couldn't be a person who was employed by a public or a private agency that served children. So they've removed that requirement in the hopes that it will help CPMTs and FAPs across the state be able to fill the parent rep role. So that's what that's for. 2208 is the administrative budget plan funding. And this is the super small administrative money that we get from the state to help support CSA. They did have a $500,000 increase for the state. So we we probably got a little bit of an increase. I don't think it was anything significant, and it's never been a huge amount of money. So, but there was that increase. And then we have to, each year, we have to submit for that money. So Katie and I will probably be taking care of that. And then 2209 has to do with the year end, just making sure. So September 30th is the cutoff for all of the CSA funding. So you need to make sure everything is up and loaded and ready to roll at that point, because that is the cutoff. And then they sent out just what the appropriation amounts were for your base match, for your non-mandated funds, and then for your sped wrap. So that's what 2209 was for. And that was all of the administrative memos. So any questions about any of them?
So Jennifer, I guess from the schools, right, with all those different tiers, we could talk afterwards just in terms of functionality to start coding and crafting POSOs, right? Because that.
So yeah, the school, so those private day providers are supposed to be the ones reporting the tiers, because they're the ones that say what their ratios are. So once they do that, that's how you guys are going to go in and select which one is the right purchase order, like the standard, I think it's the standardized service names or something like that got shifted. So that's what you're going to have to be paying attention to, because it's no longer, I think it used to just say like, I don't know, private day or whatever it said.
Right, private tuition.
It's now that's not a choice anymore. So you're not going to be able to pick that one.
Okay.
Yep.
That it, Jennifer? Okay. Program subcommittee update.
So there really isn't much of an update. We didn't meet this month. I don't believe we met last month either, just due to a few different factors. But we have plans to meet next month. I know we're still getting in the data from the surveys, and Jennifer, I'm not sure what those timeframes are again on the surveys, but I feel like we should be getting some of it in and just still working on that.
Yep. So surveys will be coming to program for the August meeting. It would have come for July, but we didn't meet. So it'll come to August, and then it'll come to CPMT in August.
Thank you, Krista. Okay, we are down to agency updates from members. Is there any significant updates that folks want to make?
If I could jump in just for the schools, only to piggyback on it, didn't feel like the appropriate time when folks were talking about their experiences with residential placements, sort of capping out, right? Sending kids back to the community. I just want to point out that there are some issues with some private day schools, and I'd say issues not only in that the stressors are just like in the community with community service boards, social services, sort of this out of our league a call, and which is going to prompt us, and we've talked about this in the past, where at least speaking for Albemarle schools, we built in, we could serve all kids, and then we doubled down on intensive staffing to sort of carve out a niche of the more intensive level of kids that we should be able to take care of, and we've done that. But now that there's an even more intense level that is falling between private day, saying, no, it's not really a case we take, and it spans, right? Children with emotional disabilities typically, or autism. So we are going to be looking at that, but it will impact, as you could see even from our fiscal reports. Schools are over a bit. So I think that is an indicator, a red flag, especially for Albemarle, that, okay, we need to double down on our programming. I think keep what's intact, but now build another new layer as an insulator to minimize the out of community placements, which are on the horizon if we don't do something. So more of a, I hear ya. There's a a growing crisis with private day as much as we're feeling with residential, which we've also felt. In addition to the community cost, we're having kids and families move, like that were longtime folks that they can't. They're stressed fiscally, emotionally, and we're seeing some movement there, and not a good kind of movement. So I wanted to just throw that from the school's perspective to endorse that it is a community issue that's occurring, and that I share in the stress, and want to share the pain we're hearing from families as well. So.
Thanks, Kevin.
Nita, I don't really have an update, but I do have a question. I just wondered what the status was of the CHINS work group that we had talked about convening. We're going to be able to get that started soon.
So I know Katie was working on that, but it became an issue of like school folks being out over the summer and really wanting them to be on it. And so I think that's probably going to happen when schools go back in session before we can get that group going.
Okay.
Will you state what that group is looking at? Is that what to do now that kids? I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know this, but what is the CHINS committee?
Martha can probably best answer that, but my naive takeaway is we're trying to figure out why we aren't spending that money and what maybe other ways that we could use that resource. Is that, am I in the ballpark there, Martha?
Yes, you're absolutely in the ballpark. I think we're trying to figure out best ways as a community to use those funds, and maybe there are children we should be serving that we haven't served as the court numbers continue to hold fairly low. And we have some other funding streams that we use prior or in addition to using CSA.
Thanks, Martha. Sorry, I did not.
That's okay.
Okay. Any other questions, announcements, or updates? All righty. We are on retreat debriefing.
So for this, primarily what we were looking at, you guys should have gotten the CQI template filled out and then the strategic plan updated from the retreat that we did. So it's really just an opportunity. Hopefully you had time to look it over and then let us know if anything, doesn't look right, or if you think something's missing. It's just your opportunity to provide any feedback that you have about that. I know one of the questions that had come up was around whether we could break out race by mandate type. And I believe that we can do that on the OCS website, that there's a way to be able to pull that up. So that if that's something that you guys want to look at, just figuring out like how often do you want to look at it? And then it's just a matter of getting it pulled up so that you can see, because I know that was the one, I think that was the one question that really hadn't been answered that came up. So if anybody has any feedback on the template or the strategic plan, feel free to share.
What we can do, I can share the CQI template so that for those of you who, need to see it to talk about it would be helpful, or we can wait till next time, or I'm not sure how to handle this. I will thoroughly admit I did not get to
It may make sense
the
to wait.
CQI.
We got a lot of folks subbing for other folks.
Exactly.
So maybe we can table this for next
Can we
month.
table that? Because I think it's a useful discussion and one that we would share it and look and have a discussion, and it's just not the right time. Great. Thanks, Jennifer. So this discussion may have to wait for our normal attendees because it's about the time when we meet, the day and time. So I don't know
Yeah,
what.
So the one thing that I did want to just bring to the folks who regularly come to CPMT is to make you aware that the ordinance that kept the county meeting virtually ends as of our September meeting. So for September, CPMT has to go back to in-person for the county. I recognize that the city may not be in that same place as of September, but again, I'm not sure. But I do know that the county and anybody that's an Albemarle CPMT member will need to meet in person as of our September meeting. So one of the things to think about is because it's been so long since we've met in person, we have to find a space again. So we need to kind of work out some of the logistics. And then if the city continues to need to meet virtually, then we just need to make sure we have the capability of having a meeting in person and virtually for the city folks, if that's what's needed. So I just wanted to make sure that that was on
When you
everybody's
said,
radar.
Jennifer, when you said no hybrid on the agenda.
So the county's not
that?
allowed to
The
have a
county,
hybrid meeting.
people can't be hybrid, some on, some, okay.
No, and the only reason we would do a hybrid meeting is if the
If
city,
the city couldn't, is
Right.
mandated not to be in person.
exactly. So I just want to make sure folks knew about that.
Okay. And I see on there, it's a discussion of whether to move it to Wednesday to Thursday and times. And so is that something that's wanted to be talked about next month? Or do y'all want to do it now?
Just a question when you were just talking about it, Jennifer, like is the room that we are typically in, or would this time go totally? Or we just need to find a different space to put all of us delightful people in?
Yes to everything. Like, I think that's all the stuff we've got to figure out, is just all of those details. And so the other issue is because previously we talked about potentially moving the meeting date and time. So if we do that, it obviously affects like what rooms are going to be available. So you know what I mean? It's like a lot of pieces that have to be figured out. And probably the one that needs to be figured out first is when, if we're looking to move the meeting, we need to know when so that we can start looking for a room to accommodate everybody. So and like I said, I know there's a lot of people subbing today. So if you guys could make it a point to let the folks that you're covering for know, and the folks that are regularly attend, please come prepared next month to really hash out a meeting date and time, so that we can work on making sure we have a room available for September. That would be really helpful. And do the city folks know, like, is there a chance you're going to be back in person?
I see Ashley's on here and she probably has more information than I do, but my understanding is that decision-making bodies will go back in person when the continuity of governance ordinance expires. Do I have that right, Ashley?
Sort of. So remember, there is a new update to FOIA and FOIA regulations. There are some boards and commissions that will not have to go back in person. But for example, Planning Commission, BAR, those had to go back in person already. So we have not had a discussion in full, nor has council, to my understanding, about when the continuity of governance ordinance will be lifted. I suspect that will be September, but I also can tell you that because of the new FOIA law and also the additional access that we give for transparency to our community, there are going to be some boards and commissions that do not go back in person and maybe stay virtual, so people can continue to attend comfortably and safely, because COVID is still real and people still have childcare and all these other things. But I cannot tell you for certain what will happen because I do not know yet. So sorry for that very squishy, feels like a lawyer answer, trying not to be. We just haven't had those conversations yet. Especially because we have a different space issue. We have tiny spaces versus the stadium size palatial space that the county has for their board of supervisors. I'm sure, Ryan, you miss our tiny space.
There's nothing that would prevent us from attending a joint public meeting in person. So does that answer your question, Jennifer?
I think so. I mean, I think the reality is once we figure out the date and time of the meeting, then what we'll do is just make sure we have a room big enough to accommodate everybody, but also have the capability of making it a hybrid meeting if needed for the city folks. I think that's probably what we'll look to making sure we can accommodate.
And I will say the schools in Charlottesville are in person. School board meetings.
I know we have a lot of people subbing, but I'm just gonna, and we're gonna talk about this more, but I am gonna throw it out here to move it from the third Wednesday because I have to regularly attend board meetings, and when we go back in person, that makes it extremely difficult. Especially if it's if it's in the county office building here at Lane, that's not as big a deal. But if I have to go to say 5th Street or City Space or wherever we decide to do it, that would be a much bigger deal.
So for you, Ryan, it's not the Wednesday at 3 time, it's the third Wednesday.
Yeah, well, if it was the third Wednesday and it was in the morning, like 9, 10 o'clock, that's fine because the board meetings start at 1 o'clock. So typically, the staff stuff is between 1 and 4. And so that's why it gets a little tricky on certain Wednesdays.
Is there a way, Jennifer, Lisa may know too, like, I'm worried that next month we'll have a conversation that we still don't know. Like, it would be nice to be equipped with a Survey Monkey or, that everyone got to say what they could or couldn't do. But I hate assigning work to somebody. But do other people feel like that? I'm just worried we won't come with the real voices around, okay, Ryan can't do, that time if we don't do some sort of survey of what's off the table or, I don't want to move it to Thursday if only one person wants it to be Thursday, so I would suggest us doing that kind of, it doesn't have to be Survey Monkey. I just threw that out there. Lisa could do it how she does our agenda meetings kind of thing. But I feel like we should weigh in individually by email or through a survey and then talk about it. Does that make sense? Now, if y'all have all trust, no, we can do it. Okay, I'm fine. It's a little worried about that conversation without that information from people.
No, I think we need to push.
Yeah, so I can check with actually Mary is the one who runs our Survey Monkey. I think she was, I don't know if she still is. So I can, oh, okay. So I can check to see if we have some way to get that out to folks to fill out. I know I don't have access to be able to do that, but I can check with the folks who do and see if they can send something out to everybody.
Yeah, any program that Albemarle uses that does that.
Okay.
There's a bunch, but all those young people know them. I don't. I just remember Survey Monkey. Okay.
I've seen some people use Doodle Poll or something to capture common times.
I know we've used it in
Poll
the
won't work
past.
for me anymore.
Yeah, we've run into some issues. So I'll work on getting something out to folks. Yeah. And then the other thing that I was just going to bring up, Anita, you can certainly chime in, is every July, CPMT has to nominate their new chair for the city and for the county. So it's now July and here we are. And I know Misty's not here, who's the current chair for the city. So just putting it out there for folks to be aware that we need to come up with chairs for the city and the county.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I'm so swamped. I just can't do it. So I feel like my term's over. Hit me in 10 years.
So again, I will say I know we've got folks subbing, so it might be a little bit hard to come up with chairs. I know that if anybody for the city is interested, you're certainly more than welcome. I think Misty had been agreeable to staying on if she had to, but she was certainly willing to let somebody else do it if they wanted to. So it sounds like the city might be okay unless somebody's really wanting to chair for the upcoming year. So if not, I know for us, like Nita said, she's really just got a lot going on right now.
Yeah, I can't do it just because no one can do it. I'm so sorry.
Yep. So I'm putting it out there to folks to think about, if somebody's really anxious right now and wants to take it on, we're certainly happy to accommodate. But if not, I definitely just want to put it out there for folks to be thinking about, whether you might have availability to chair, because we're going to have to come up with one. We can put it out to August because Misty will probably chair the August meeting, but then the county will need a chair, when we meet again in August.
All right. Well, I think it's time to adjourn. Oh, wait a second. Is there something I'm supposed to say with the adjournment?
No.
Okay, good. All right, folks. See you next month.